All right, great. So first up, I want to thank you guys all for attending. So we did assemble for this corporate fitness and corporate wellness seminar some of the, I think, are some of the brightest minds in the industry. So we're thankful to have the panelists here today. I can definitely tell you that for those of you who don't know, we've been doing weekly seminars actually in 5 different languages, mostly focused on fitness centers, studios, and personal trainees. So what we wanted to do for you guys today is do a special edition because Virtuagym has recently, in the past few years, really focused and drove into the corporate wellness industry. And because of that, we wanted to really support not just our partners who are already working in corporate fitness and corporate wellness, but as well as bringing in people from the industry, right? Because we're all going through this together. And it's definitely a great opportunity for us to be knowledge sharing, learning from each other, and getting through this together. So before we get started, a few housekeeping items. 2 important things for the attendees is there's a chat function as well as a Q&A function. So for the chat function, we're basically going to get a dialogue going, a written dialogue going in addition to the verbal dialogue. So please change where it says 2 panelists to 2 panelists and all attendees. That way everyone can see the dialogue that is happening. And then for the Q&A, if you have questions that you want to bring up to the expert panelists or you have questions in general, feel free to put them into the Q&A section. We'll try to bring them into the presentation. If not, we have a couple members of our team who will be answering them independently. And then, of course, at the end, we'll also be able to address questions. So that's the housekeeping items. Like I said, I'm thankful that I have some expert panelists that have agreed to join us. So I'll let them each do a brief introduction. So Brendan, would you mind giving this a start?
Yeah, so I'm Brendan O'Reen. I'm the Operations and Business Development Manager with FitVision. We're a corporate wellness partner based in Dublin in Ireland, and we've been working now for the past 6 years with some of the largest corporations in Ireland, providing corporate wellness programs directly to them on site and now obviously online.
Yep. So hi, my name is Hugo Bram, co-founder and co-CEO of Virtuagym, technology provider in the fitness and corporate wellness space.
And my name is Matt Parrott, and I'm Vice President of Business Development for Corporate Fitness Works. We're headquartered in Florida, and we provide on-site and virtual fitness services to help solve the health challenges of working populations.
I'm Derek Van Dorick. I'm the Director of Corporate Wellness at Virtuagym. So basically, I work directly with employers who are doing employee wellness programs, as well as our partners with corporate fitness and corporate wellness to help them with their strategy and having effective programs.
Hi everybody, I'm Mark O'Reilly, and Brendan gave us a nice introduction, but I suppose I'm founder and managing director, and I can speak to maybe dealing on the ground with CEOs, business teams, and employees today as well. So bringing a different element from Brendan today.
And my name is Ted Vicky. I have been in our corporate fitness industry for the last 30 years. My first client was the White House in Washington, D.C. I had the privilege of spending 11 years serving the health and fitness of the president and his staff. I then moved to Ireland and got a master's and a PhD. So my PhD is in engineering, and I look at and break and have fun testing all sorts of digital and wearable apps within our space.
Excellent. Well, thank you all to the panelists. For today's agenda, this is what we have planned for you. So we want to lay a little bit of context. This will be a little bit more global in nature. So we'll talk really about the global scenario. What are some really important statistics or kind of scenarios that we're experiencing across the globe? And then we'll dive into kind of the business stages. And depending on regulation, geographic region, et cetera, you could fall into different business stages at the moment. For us, we'll focus on the accept and adapt stage, as well as preparing for some kind of post-coronavirus back to somewhat normalization process. So that's really what we're focused on in this presentation. Obviously, we're going to have expert opinions throughout this. So I'll try to minimize my talking so you guys can hear from the real experts here today. So to kind of lay the groundwork, so I want to talk a little bit about the global scenario just to try to build a little bit of context. So what do we know? We know that regulation across the globe has been prominent during this period. Among the first kind of areas to receive kind of regulation or restrictions are any kind of gathering of multiple people, right? We see that this is at risk of spreading this quicker. So regulatory committees, bodies, agencies, etc., the first thing they did was look at where these crowds accumulate and basically put restrictions on them. Unfortunately for us, fitness centers is a huge aspect of our industry. And this is one of the ones where obviously there are groups of people coming together and was hit hard. So if you look here at an article from the UK, I consider them one of the later in the stages of shutting the fitness centers officially. And we see that this has also already been a scenario for over a month. If we look at what this means, it's not just these places that are accumulating crowds that are kind of shut off or restricted at the moment. This has impacted the entire economy. So you guys have probably heard 16 million unemployed at the time this article was published in the New York Times. Newsflash, since this, it's now 22 million in the US. And this is kind of reflected in global markets that everyone is experiencing this. So we have to think about this from the employer perspective as well. Because our employers that we're working with, that we're partners with, etc., they are also running their own businesses, right? And they're being impacted by what's going on. So we have to take that into consideration. Also considering that even if they aren't experiencing layoffs, etc., their office scenario has likely completely shifted, right? So even if they're able to maintain their workforce to a high capacity, they've now moved to an at-home environment. So if you look at all the panelists here with our videos, it's pretty evident by our backdrops that we're all working from home offices, etc. So this is kind of a validation of that. And one of the key things I want us to think about, and that the panelists are going to provoke during these strategic conversations, is the fact that if you look at this article from the BBC, they're saying that there's this concern over how people are living sedentary lives. So your employer is asking you to work from an at-home environment. I know also government regulations are basically saying also only leave your house when it's absolutely necessary, when you're doing kind of essential activities. So we're definitely living a much more sedentary lifestyle now, and it's important for us to understand that, focus on it, so that we can tackle that. So the 4 business stages of kind of, this is actually a slide that some of my colleagues have shared in previous presentations and webinars. We see that we're past the confusion stage, right? We've all accepted that this scenario potentially is a little bit gray at the moment, but new measures have been put into place. The measures are very strict. We know that we're working from home. And for many of us, depending on where you're at in the business stage, it could be that we actually don't even know when the end or the light at the end of the tunnel is coming. Some of us in Europe, and we'll get to it in just a second, are a little bit ahead of the curve. So they are seeing a slight little light at the end of the tunnel. And then you have very extremes who were maybe one of the first countries to be impacted, where they're actually beginning kind of this ramp up phase. So I want to be careful here. When we talk about ramp up, we're not talking about going back to business as usual. The panelists will get into this, but I think we all agree that the industry as we know it will never quite be the same. So business as normal is basically out of the question, but the new normal rather. So a question I have for Hugo, kind of an interesting perspective. Obviously, you're the CEO of Virtuagym. So you lead a workforce of over 200 employees. From an employer perspective, what are your concerns about employees working from this home environment, and how does it fit into kind of this accept and adapt and preparing phases?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think first and foremost, I think the first question that comes to mind for many as an employer is, how are we going to organize this, right? So what happened in the Netherlands is basically overnight the government said, hey, we advise your working staff to work from home. And then we were like, okay, we want to follow up on this advice, be proactive, because probably within a certain time frame, looking at the developments outside, it's going to be compulsory, which of course it did. So yeah, I think first the practical stuff. We had many desktop computers. Does everybody have good home setup to be able to work, internet connections, etc. But now, as I think that all went relatively well, our workforce is relatively young also. So I think digital natives, so to say. So our company, and also because we are also in our internal processes very technology driven, we use a lot of software in our processes. So we could work also online, all our phone lines, everything is all voice over IP. We're using Salesforce for service and sales. So that's all cloud-based systems. I think on the longer term, the big challenge is really about keeping people accountable and happy. And that's what we're getting. We're using a software to kind of check how people are feeling, what they think about how our company is doing, if they're happy and engaged. And we do see that some people are feeling a bit alone, had they missed their colleagues, etc. So I think moving forward, keeping your employees engaged and happy is going to be the big challenge when this is taking longer.
Perfect. And that's an interesting perspective, because I'm thinking about it from Matt. A question for you is, you're in a unique position where you're obviously working for a provider. Your client or your partners are employers. So you're working and speaking to people with like Hugo who have these concerns, etc. But at the same time, you have your own business priorities, conversations going on as well. So how are you balancing them? And then also taking on kind of this approach where the employers are actually wanting more of a solution, but also they have to be a bit more hands-off now because their minds are on other things at the moment.
Sure. Yeah. I think that the first part of that is that we recognize our employer needs really haven't changed. They still have workforces. They still have employees that need to be healthy. They still have employees that need connection with one another and with their leadership. And so the only thing that's really changed is how is that service delivered? And instead of being on site, face to face, having those conversations, we're now doing it virtually. But the nice part about that is we've been able to foster and build those relationships on site, so that when we moved to a virtual solution, it was very natural. They're like, oh, you know, my fitness professionals reaching out to me and they have solutions and they're delivering tools for us. Now, as far as preparing for the future, we recognize our company will never be the same again. We're moving towards significantly more virtual services than we did before, because we've developed more of those services during this interim. I mean, it's kind of like adding bacon to a turkey sandwich. Once you have it, you can't go back to regular turkey. So that's sort of where we're at. I mean, I think it's an exciting place to be, because we've used the opportunity to expand our capabilities in a lot of ways.
Wait until you see Game Changers, Matt. You're gonna drop the bacon and the turkey.
All right, I look forward to it.
One thing that's also important to note about the business stages is, obviously it depends on geographic region, location, regulation, type of business, type of industry the employer's in, etc. But one thing I want to focus on right now is looking specifically at those geographic regions. So if we think about it, kind of the first country to be hit hard by this was China. We see that they're actually in the ramping up stage. So they're going back to a more normalized, or the new normal kind of environment, which is essentially great. It gives us a sign of hope that if we take the right precautions, this is essentially where we're get. Now, there's no promise that even if we do start to get into prepare and ramp up, things won't regress and we go through new cycles. But for the time being, China is ramping up. I read an article even yesterday. One of the hardest hitting industries that I think we know about is the travel industry as well. So I know China's domestic flights are back up to about 50% their pre-event capacity. So they're really ramping up at the moment. But as you can see here, we actually have panelists representing the USA, Netherlands, and Ireland at the moment. So the Netherlands and Ireland, from my brief research, it looks like you're at a point where you're actually almost to a point where you're flattening the curve a bit. And I think even daily activations, or daily rather cases, is actually going down. So a question, I guess we'll start with within Ireland for Brendan and Mark, and then we'll go on to Hugo after. Is you're a couple weeks ahead of the US. It's still on the incline as far as activation cases. I guess for you, what was kind of a trigger for you guys as a sign that you were getting in towards this more preparing phase? And if you have advice on, at what point you would recommend them starting to prepare for this prepare phase.
Yeah, I might come in first, and then Brendan, you can obviously come in on the back of that. I think the biggest thing for us in Ireland was that the government obviously have been very clear in their communications. They've given us a date essentially of May the 5th, where, listen, we're not going to be going back to how things were beforehand, but we're going to slowly start to revert back. The biggest thing I would say for businesses who are maybe still in that accept and adapt phase is to realize that, as we've mentioned already, the old normal is not going to be the new normal. We're not going to go back to business as usual. So what we did personally with Fit Vision was we looked at, and Matt, you alluded to it, talking about building relationships with clients, making it very easy to then actually keep that connection virtually. So what we looked at in Fit Vision was what we did really well in terms of the on-site work. What was it that really helped build those relationships? And then what did we implement when we had to act really fast with this, when coronavirus first hit? So like, what did we do in terms of webinars, online streaming, etc.? And very similar to what Matt had mentioned, we've basically put all of that into a pot, if you like. We've also looked at some of the measures that are going to be put in place, like social distancing when we do return. So this idea of maybe, hundreds of people cramming into a fitness class or a gym, let's be honest, it's not going to happen until at least we have a vaccine for the coronavirus. So what we've done at Fit Vision is taken all of that information and actually improved our current offering. So keeping some of the old, bringing in some of the new based on the last couple of weeks, but realizing that actually business is not going to go back to usual. You need to actually adapt and have a new offering when all of this eventually does begin to settle down. And I think anybody who's still in the accept and adapt phase should start to think along those lines already.
Yeah, just to add to that, is like a big part of it is that keeping those lines of communication open and very clear and honest with like any clients that you're working with at the moment now virtually. Like, we need to make sure that as we start slowly progressing back to a more larger on-site presence, obviously, than we have now, that it is going to be suitable for each client individually. The only way to do that obviously is to make sure that we are matching their needs. Like, they're not going to be the same needs as they were in the beginning. Now, some people may still be working at home, and then others on site, a slow drip process of people coming in. We do just need to make sure that that line of communication is open and that we're making these plans now to ensure that when it does come around, people do start coming back in, we're ready to go, we have everything set. So that's kind of where we're at in the moment in this preparation phase, is we do still have everything running online. But we are putting plans in place now, specifically with each client, on how they would like to go about reintroducing wellness to the actual on-site side.
Excellent. Hugo, did you have anything to add from that perspective? Maybe more so on the employer aspect?
Well, yeah, that's maybe another question I'd like to ask somebody from maybe Ted. I agree that the future after COVID-19 won't be the same, but obviously we also have many people expect a financial crisis to hit. So in how far that do you expect that to affect the business for corporate health and wellness, which by some people is maybe seen as a nice to have luxury?
Well, I think that, first of all, we're all guessing. We think this is what's going to happen, and so I want to put a little caveat around what I'm going to say. Corporate fitness, corporate wellness will change. The corporations, like has been said earlier, still need a provider to help with their solutions. Now, I think that what has happened is going to allow corporate fitness to expand even greater. When I would bid on contracts, if the facility didn't have more than, say, 200 employees on site, then it wasn't worthwhile putting in an on-site fitness center. But now, with the use of technology, with mobile phones, with apps, with wearables, you're not going to have a virtual on-site wellness center for any corporation. So I think that the reach of corporate wellness is going to grow even greater than what it was before COVID-19.
That's an interesting one, because that's also what we, of course, as a technology company are trying to do with our providers. We often come in as a tool to support the facility management, the physical facility management. But I definitely agree there's a big upside in going completely digital, because you can also reach that often 85% of the people that are not going into the physical facility, but do have a need for wellness services, even though they perhaps prefer to go running outside or play tennis or golf. So yeah, I totally agree.
No, that's great. And Ted, one thing I'd be curious to know when we're talking about geographic regions for you is obviously kind of you have many hats at the moment, Professor. Obviously, you do consulting as well. If we look at the U.S., many of the attendees here are also from the U.S. as well. Many of them have partners, clients across the United States. We see with different regulations that some states are even actually opening up at the moment. So how are you balancing it, and how are you giving your recommendations, and how does that change based upon their specific geographic region? Is that something you're taking into consideration?
It is, Derek, and I'm not looking at it as a whole of the United States. I'm looking at it from a state-by-state perspective, because in North Dakota, the prevalence of COVID-19 is nowhere near what it is in New York or California. So I think you're going to see a slow rollout across the country. And I also think that there could be a chance that if we aren't careful, that we could have another small uptick in COVID-19. So I'm really keeping an eye on what the CDC is saying, obviously, and then looking at what the governors are doing and how they are preparing and implementing the different programs that are going to happen. It's been mentioned earlier, we probably won't go back to work until that vaccine is made and until available testing for all corporations. And I think that's an opportunity for corporate fitness right there. Imagine the fitness center being used to test all the employees before they come back to work. So I think that we need to pivot as an industry, corporate fitness. We need to find other solutions. And, you know, I'm a big fan of disruption. And a lot of people think disruption is a bad word, but I don't. Disruption just means it's to cause something to be unable to continue in a normal way. Well, we're in the midst of disruption now. And I think we're going to find even more opportunities if we take the opportunity to pivot and look for them.
No, excellent. I think that's a good segue also into kind of the next topic. So for the attendees, they know, maybe the panelists don't know I just did this, but I released a poll to the attendees, and about 50% of them said they were in the accept and adapt phase. More so around 20 to 30% feel that they're preparing. And then we have a couple on the confusion and ramping side. So clearly the bulk of our attendees today are accepting and adapting, and then also getting a little bit into the preparing. So one of the things I think is going to be super beneficial is to talk through maybe specific strategies your organization is actually taking, or in the case of, for instance, Ted, the consultative actions you're recommending, etc. So I had the chance, fortunately, to speak to each one of these panelists on a one-on-one conversation and really pick their brain about the topic. So when we focus on accept and adapt, a common themes that I spoke with the panelists about, and they have really good input on, are being present, developing habits, and building trust. So on each one of these, I want to open it up to the panel. So starting with the being present, I know at Virtuagym, we kind of developed our technology to have natural touch points with members and employees throughout the journey. So whether it's your corporate fitness, where you obviously had natural touch points that you had built into your business model, or more of an employee wellness program that you obviously included these natural touch points as well. The fact that we've gone from more physical face-to-face interaction to more digital, how are you still able to maintain your presence with the employers and the employees?
I think one way to do it is right here. It's the mobile phone. We all have it. A lot of them are smartphones now. I gave a talk a while ago saying that this phone here is 1,000,000 times more powerful than the computer used to put a man on the moon back in the late 60s. So I think it's our opportunity, our generation's moonshot, if you will, to find a way that we can help people live healthier lives through a device they keep in their pocket and that they use. Well, let's be real. What was my alarm clock this morning? My mobile phone. What was the first thing I did? I checked my email on my mobile phone. I checked social media. I checked the news. It's prevalent. It's everywhere. And I think if we can harness that power, we're going to be one step closer to helping people along their path to living a healthier life.
I think just in terms of like specific strategies and kind of mindsets for this current situation that we're in anyway, about being present, is like, well, a huge part of that is being flexible as well. So one of the things that we were able to do very quickly, and obviously in adapting to the situation that we're in and moving everything virtually, was the fact that we were offering all of our clients to pick the times that they needed most. Like, when do they need us most? Is that the first thing in the morning? Is that 5:30, 6 a.m.? Is it 7 p.m.? We needed to make sure that we were able to still meet those needs regardless of the time of day, because everyone is now on multiple different time schedules. So one, like, a huge part of that was, like Ted was saying, using mobile technology, using Google Hangouts to do one-to-one wellness check-ins with each specific client base. So from the CEO right down to your line managers and your executives, we're doing like 20-30 minute just quick catch-ups every week with one of our wellness coaches to ensure that everything is still running. They're still on their wellness journey despite being in a bit more of a confined space.
And sorry, just quick question on that point. And it seems like you're having a lot of like one-on-one interaction as well as group. Are they very receptive to these communications? Like, have they been given positive feedback as to like enjoying you having these consultations with them, et cetera?
Yeah, so it's part of our services anyway. Like, previously to this, obviously on site, we do a lot of one-to-one check-ins and that side. But being able to now just seamlessly move that across to a virtual basis has really helped a lot of people who would be feeling those, like, that social connection is gone. One of our big parts is being on site and having a human connection with the staff, not just coming in and doing whatever class or anything that it is. It's being there, having a conversation, going up and talking to people. So a huge part of that is to ensure that we can carry that through on a virtual setting now. And if that's through mobile, if that's through using laptops or whatever it is, it's trying to continue on with that. And we've had a very good uptake in terms of but our online classes, and then on top of that, our actual virtual one-to-one sessions as well.
Can I just add something quickly on that point that Brendan has made as well? And this is just more advice for anybody who's in the accept and adapt phase. Is we would provide a lot of online webinars. We would do a lot of, obviously, group classes, etc. One bit of advice for people at the moment would be, people obviously are missing out on this, as Brendan mentioned, social connection, but also the social affirmation, the positive reinforcement, the accountability. So what we've done with a lot of our webinars is try to make them exactly like this is here. Try and actually, rather than, if you like, just presenting knowledge across a screen, actually try and ask the individuals, what is it that you're struggling with at the moment? What useful tips might you be able to share with other colleagues? So when you're doing some of this corporate work, try as best you can to make it interactive. And one way that that's really been helped by for us is through the community hub with the Virtuagym app. It's a fantastic way to get people to connect. You can put polls, surveys, etc. So we're using Zoom, we're using Google Hangouts, but also that Virtuagym app with the Community Hub for two of our biggest clients, which is Oracle and Primark, who have over 1,000 employees. It's a fantastic way to communicate with individuals.
Quick question on that front. I'd be curious to know if you're able to, obviously you recommended the webinar route. Do you have kind of advice on the opportunities that you saw, maybe just a few quick topics that you saw were kind of the most impactful or that people were really passionate about right now?
Absolutely. I think we do one specifically for ways to wellness while working from home. That includes everything from family members. Like we've put out a product now, which is it's specifically for family members, because we got to remember that like this employee, they're an employee, they wear the employee hat, but they also wear maybe the mother hat, they wear the sister hat, we have to try and cater for individuals. So ways to wellness from working from home, I think information around resilience at the moment is very, very important. But then even just some of the simplest things, nutrition strategies while at home, effective exercise tips while working from home, but actually doing it in a way where people are sharing ideas. And yes, you can come in with your knowledge every now and again, but I think actually the group think structure works far better at the moment.
I really like what Ted said about also not just seeing it as a threat, but as an opportunity. I think there's this. I heard once that the Chinese they write the word crisis in two brush strokes, and the one stands for danger, and the other stands for opportunity. So I think that's very, very wise. And I think that it also goes in this case that yes, I think the world as we know it, and in line with that, the corporate health and wellness offering, especially corporate fitness, physical services, are under threat a lot. But I think it's really about adapting to change and grasping the opportunity that lies there to be able to go virtual here. And I think also we as a company are now, we have management and we have digital coaching solution, but we really kind of, well, it's not a full pivot, but really focused our team now to go all in on the online engagement and coaching functionalities moving forward. Because yeah, I think this is gonna be a longer time where blended models will coexist of online and offline services. So online coaching, will be there to stay, I think.
Great. Anything else regarding kind of the touch points in kind of strategies before we get on into developing the habits? All right, great. So the second thing we wanted to talk about was essentially developing habits. As we've talked about earlier, we're all working from essentially home at the moment. We're not able to go outside on a regular basis just for fun, at least in many areas. What we see is we're humans, we're people of routine, right? So pre this stage, we had our own routines, even whether it's, when you commute to work, at what time you have your coffee, etc. When we kind of moved to this work from home environment, things got disrupted basically immediately, especially in the beginning phases. There's that word for Ted, disruption again. We see that kind of immediately, it was more of a short-term perspective. So many people even were treating it as almost like, hey, this isn't going to last long. Let's treat it as almost like a cheat period. I'll have a cup of wine at night. I'll eat whatever I want this week. And then, next week, this will all blow over and we'll get back to our life. Now, what they're seeing is that this period's, oh no, it lasted longer than normal. So now we have to make sure that we stop them from not only developing good habits, but from not developing these bad habits. So from your strategic point of view, I want to open up to the panelists. What are you able to do to kind of build routine since everyone's lifestyle has basically been disrupted and shifted to a completely new, I would say, lack of routine?
I think Brendan alluded to it when he talked about understanding the schedules of the populations that you're working with. And it's very different for each one of our populations depending on, you know, their corporate atmosphere. But we want to offer, for example, those Zoom group exercise classes at a time when we know that they like them before and when they like them now. So you kind of combine the information on their behavior that you had before with your current strategy and try and learn as much as you can about each population. But at the same time, I think we're very aware of the fact that we don't want to turn into compliance officers here, and we don't want to use a stick when a carrot will do the trick. Meaning, you want to try and incentivize behavior, but you don't want to beat people over the head if they don't comply with it either. I think that people have responded really well to us providing the tools, making sure they know they're available, and then incentivizing them along the way. But rather than using some kind of an approach that would penalize those who don't, we just incentivize those who do.
I want to follow up with something that Matt said right there. And at the university that I teach at, when this first happened, we got an email from the president, and it said, understand that the students are in a stressful position. Do what you can to make their lives easier. And I think that is also true for employees. This is new. No one's done this before. So like Matt said, the carrot is very, very important. But understand, this isn't a time to try to get your personal best on anything. This is a time to just to maintain or even take a break, but have a plan to come back. I think that's one of the ways that we can get through this.
Yeah, I think maybe the whole habit part of people might be even pose a big problem for after kind of the normal return, so to say. I had a buddy of mine who had he had a burnout, and he was really a gym rat, so he really had that routine. And then after his burnout, I think, well, I haven't checked with him lately about it, but I think he still not doesn't go to the gym anymore because he kind of completely lost that routine, and it was very difficult for him to kind of build that habit again. So I think that's definitely something to take into account, and could be actually pose a threat for physical services.
Kind of two questions on that front, one for Brendan and then following up with Matt. So from Brendan, when you're doing these consultations and you've asked them for the timeframes in general, do we see any kind of common themes to this? For instance, are people supplementing their normal commute hour, or is it generally a lunchtime thing? Is there any kind of pattern you've seen to when people are interested in doing this, or is it scattered?
It can be similar for certain companies, and then obviously like changes up, but a lot of times it's early morning, it's lunchtime, and then it's in the evening. Like, so that can be varying by an hour or two, but a lot of times, like for most of the clients that we work with on site, we would start at 6 a.m. and it's part of everybody's routine. A lot of we have our regulars are usually the morning users, so they're still there, still showing up every morning at the same time. We want to make sure that we can then, for the people who usually would miss those classes on site because it's too early, they can't get there on time, we're now trying to, again, incentivize them to use that time that they would have been commuting to then be part of this new group. And hopefully then we can carry that through then when we move back, that these people now see this as, oh, this is part of my routine. This is, I can keep going with this, and it'll be just the day-to-day norm. But really, it does vary quite often. But mainly it's early mornings, it's lunchtimes, it's in the evening, from like just trying to fit within each person's schedule as much as we possibly can. And the huge thing that we do, and what actually helps a lot with using the technology now that we have, is the ability to record these live sessions so that you can then disseminate them out and people will be able to go and look back at them, watch them. We like use our YouTube page very regularly to share specifically with clients their classes that they have, giving them, the people that do still have a different schedule to everybody else, to have the option there to still look and view and be able to feel like they're part of the program as a whole.
Excellent. And then Matt, you brought up a good point, is essentially not not punishing maybe negative or bad behavior, but really reinforcing positive behavior is really what you guys are focusing on. And you mentioned the fact about giving like incentives, etc. Is there any way, would you be willing to maybe share, like elaborate more on that? What are kind of some ways you're enticing people to kind of continue these behaviors?
Well, to be honest, Virtuagym helps us do that. I mean, the rewards and the badges that people can earn through Virtuagym, it doesn't have to be monetary. It doesn't have to be something that makes a huge difference in their life. It's just a little goal to try and achieve, to show that they're taking a step forward rather than taking a step backward. So I think that what we try and do is leverage as much of those kinds of tools, kind of non-monetary achievements, in order to motivate behavior, because let's be honest, a lot of our clients are not handing out many financial incentives right now for physical activity or otherwise. So, I mean, Virtuagym's been a great partner for us in that sense.
Excellent. And I want to go on. I want to go on to the third aspect, and it's actually good timing because I think it can also relate to a question that we received. So the third aspect of the strategy, and I want to give maybe Mark the opportunity to speak first if you would like to on this topic, because I know he is heavily involved, especially with the relationships, etc. So how are we building trust with the employers and the employees? So as we're going into this preparing phase, people are still going to have hesitations about coming back, being around people, being in the office, and they could actually be slowing down or come back not at the pace of the actual opening up of things. So I'm wondering what you're doing to kind of remove barriers to re-entry, and then kind of aligning on that, we have a question where they're basically asking about maybe using this as a reflection on how you foresee the corporate wellness industry post this looking in kind of that prep period into what you're expecting.
Yeah, I think to speak to the first question around the employers and the employees, I think Brendan made a really good point around the employer. Keeping the line of communication open is very, very important. I think actually being empathetic in terms of how are they getting on with the current situation? What are they struggling with? Like, you know, we work with companies who've had to, which I'm sure many of you guys do as well, they've had to completely shut down. And you're talking like we've 15 individuals within our employees within our group, but some of these guys have 70,000 employees, which is incredible to have to try and navigate that. So I think trying to understand where they're at in this space also, but then also starting to strategize about how we put a plan in place together. When it comes to the employees, I think the biggest, we have a saying in Fit Vision where we always say, you know, walk in their shoes. So actually look at it from their point of view. Now, Matt said it about relationships, you know, building strong relationships with employees. How do you do that? Well, you try and walk in their shoes. It's a scary time for them. Maybe wellness or exercise is not the first thing on the top of their priority list at the moment. But I think what we can do is just let them know that we understand that, but try and remind them of the importance of having a strategy around your wellness, explaining what it does give to you. And when all this comes back to normal and people return to work, it's maybe communicating effectively the measures that we have taken to ensure their safety when they come back into an exercise class. So I think communication is the big piece around this, and having a strategy with the employer, but also showing empathy to the employee and understanding that, okay, listen, if you haven't exercised in 3 months, we totally understand that. We understand why. But listen, let's talk about the benefits of getting back into it. To speak to the second question around how, you know, how is it going to be different? How will it change? I think one thing that we don't do enough of, and I think we're all doing it at the moment, is this idea of reflecting and reconnecting with who we are as individuals. You know, what drives us, what our why is, if you like. I think how this disruption at the moment, as we've mentioned it, I think how it's actually going to benefit the corporate wellness industry, and I've definitely seen it already in Ireland, is I can actually see it becoming more prevalent within organizations. Like if you look at a company who maybe had a real solid strategy around wellness for employees, and this has now happened, it would be incredible to see what the statistics were around how individuals who really took up those programs are dealing with this situation versus organizations who had nothing in place and employees had to maybe fend for themselves. I'd be very interested in that. So I think this is going to spark a real surge in every organization having effective wellness strategies.
Excellent. So I definitely like to, I think that's a great response. And it's definitely thought provoking. I see that we've kind of provoked some questions from the audience there as well. So so one thing brought up by the audience as well is talking about, you know, specific new health priorities. I guess an open-ended question for the panelists. Do we think that there's any specific, I don't want to say fad but like specialization in some kind of prioritization that you think that the employees are going to expect? You know, such as anxiety, dealing with, you know, depression, kind of these aspects. And can you build that into the building trust as well to make sure, you know, they know you have this all-inclusiveness?
I think there are two areas that I think will come to fruition. The first one is, as you mentioned, Derek, mental health. There is going to be a need for somebody to reach out to these folks, our employees, to help them through and to help them make these new positive changes in their life. So using different types of disruptive health technologies like apps and wearables are going to be big from the mental health perspective. And the second one I think is going to be as big is sleep. Sleep is one of those areas of wellness that we know is important, but we really don't focus a lot of time on it. And everyone on this panel and on the call knows that if you don't have a good night's sleep, your day, chances are, isn't going to be as productive as it could be. So I see the shift moving towards mental health and sleep.
Excellent. Any other panelists like to comment on the topic?
Well, I'd like to kind of add to that. I think, hey, if you look at basically I think yes, the trend is wellness within companies are more growing concern by employers for well-being of their employees. I think not just because this is general accepted kind of as a nice playing nice as an employer, which of course was very much driven by lately the shortness of the difficulty to employ people. And so you basically try to be the best employer as you can. That's probably now going to change, but I think still companies are more aware of having healthy, happy people and great culture is the way to run a good, productive, efficient company. But overall, I think still cost will be a thing. Scalability will be a thing, and that's really where I see technology also playing an increasing role, as that is saying with applications, because technology kind of makes these wellness services more scalable. So it will allow you as a provider to basically coach more people, monitor more people, and maybe identify, automated through automation which people are at the highest risk and give those extra attention.
Excellent. So I think the panelists really talked about kind of their responses and kind of some strategies, actions they have taken. Kind of as Hugo has mentioned, this has been kind of disruptive for everyone. So just to give you an idea that, you know, Virtuagym, we also wanted to take into consideration what we were hearing from partners, clients, employers in the industry. And what we noticed is now more than ever, people were looking for a solution to be able to implement quickly. So with many softwares, there's obviously some kind of development period. They're looking for something to apply to their employees now. Okay, so they want to be able to provide them content now. And I think a lot of that comes into that habit building that we talked about. They also, we see that they're really focused on having something that's self-driven. So as corporate fitness, as corporate wellness, as Virtuagym, they're looking more into a solution that's going to kind of run themselves, because at this moment they have to focus on their business and being able to actually make their business function, etc. And right now they're looking for content that people can actually use from home. So Ted brought up a good point. You know, there's actually even regulations where people are stopping people from exercising out on the streets. We have to give them an opportunity to basically provide content that they're actually able to perform. So I think, Mark, was it you who was saying at the beginning you're actually climbing mountains from your apartment at the moment?
Yeah. Zwift turbo trainers, brilliant.
So actually delivering them content that they actually can perform at the moment is key. So for us, we developed kind of a turnkey solution that's not branded, but basically branded as Virtuagym, very standstill, but allows us to deliver a quick response to these people looking for a quick, short-term, relative content kind of response to this. But to finish up, I see that a lot of the questions are more futuristic. So as we get more into the preparing phase, so I do, for the last few minutes, etc. I'd like to ask you guys, and maybe I think it's best if I could actually start with a question for kind of business development. So Brendan and Matt, you guys as executives, kind of still being involved in sales processes, etc. I guess my question for you is, how are you positioning it during your sales process? How has the sales process changed? What are employers rather now expecting upon your deliverables?
Well, like I said earlier, we're not going to go back to ever being exactly the same kind of company we were before. And that's been great because our pivot has allowed us to develop a lot of tools in a lot shorter time than we might have otherwise done. So obviously, I'm going to leverage all of those tools and capabilities in any business development opportunity that we come across. But to Ted's point, I think it's going to expand our market in order to be able to reach smaller companies with virtual resources who might not otherwise be able to afford to hire a company to manage their on-site fitness and wellness solutions. So, I mean, I see opportunities both from within a proposal opportunity itself, and then in terms of who we're targeting for our future business. But in both of those cases, we're going to try and demonstrate why our attitude makes such a difference and not just our aptitude, because any company can come in and throw an app in front of somebody, but it's what do you do with that app and how do you reach the people, connect with them, and really drive and motivate behavior change.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on the back of that idea is like a huge part of it is making sure that you're being personal. It's a tailored approach. You need to make sure that everything you're going to put into a specific client or a specific company is that it's for them. It's not a cookie cutter solution. It is something that you're developing along with them and keeping that line open so there is general feedback coming back and forth to ensure that what they're getting is exactly what they need and not something that you feel they need, but you're working together to get to a common goal. And like a big part of that is just making sure that it is always there as a priority for them. That wellness is the priority for as part of the overall running of the business. Just in terms of just from when we started, it came across as very much as like we had to try retain revenue effectively from a sales point of view. We're just trying to retain the clients that we have and ensure that we're able to keep them running and keep ourselves involved in their wellness programs. But then now with these opportunities, like Matt was saying, we have a huge chance to really build on the services and packages that we're able to deliver to clients, be able to carry out much further across like multiple offices. Like we work with companies in England and in multiple different parts of Ireland now on a virtual basis to ensure that we can give the same level of quality to what would have been our main office that we were working with now out to the rest of the companies as a whole.
No, that's a perfect point. And Mark, can you kind of, I guess, echo that sentiment? Because from my understanding, not only are you part of just the business development, but as Brendan and Matt are saying, maintaining the relationships as well. You're obviously a huge figure, not necessarily just on winning business, but keeping that personal relationship. So would you say you kind of agree with that sentiment?
Oh, absolutely. I think we'd all agree here, as we all run our own businesses, is that the best way to get new business is have your current clients obviously speaking very highly of you. So I think that idea of nurturing your current clients and letting them essentially nearly do some of the work for you is so important, especially at this moment in time. So I would 100% agree with what both Brendan and Matt have said there.
Excellent. So we are at the end of the time we had coordinated for the webinar, but I want to keep this going a few minutes. So I understand that attendees will likely need to drop off at some point. However, I think the panelists who can attend, what we're going to do is we're going to stay on for a little bit longer, and we can maybe even do some live questions. So feel free to type in your questions. We can go live with some of these questions for the next few minutes. In the meantime, Ted, there was one last question. It's more of a theoretical and kind of a future perspective. And you alluded to it a little bit earlier, that mobile applications were clearly the future. Matt also talked about the delivery about it. It's not just the mobile app, but being able to execute, provide the service. So just from your expert consultative, opinion, how do you see, if you can give us a little bit more detail, maybe trans fads, the future of technology with corporate wellness, if you have a bit more while we're waiting for the questions.
Well, if you take a look at the other esteemed panelists, I am probably the elder statesman of the group. So if you take a look back when I first started in the corporate fitness industry, it was called fitness. Then 10 years later, we thought, well, we should probably change the name. So then it was worksite health promotion. And now what I'm calling corporate wellness 3.0. There are a couple things that are important. One is the data. Matt mentioned it. I've taken 17 million steps since I wore a Fitbit. So what? What am I doing with that data? And the providers that are going to be able to blend that data with the exercise prescription or the wellness prescription that they're providing for their clients are the type of companies that I think are going to really have the opportunity to expand after COVID. We need to become health hubs, not health clubs. So all of the data that our clients allow us to have and merging it all together. Right now, there isn't really a dashboard. I kind of envision sitting back one day and like in New York at the stock exchange, you got TV screens everywhere, right? And you're following the progression of the health of your individual clients, their employees, off of the computer screen. And that, to me, is where we are going. And I think we're going to see an increase in health coaching. So we're getting away from the fitness aspect of it. Wellness is all encompassing, right? So wellness, one component is fitness, but the other components of wellness are really going to start to take off. So that health coaching aspect, and even health coaching online. Someone mentioned earlier, just 20 minutes of a check-in. That really is going to show some benefit in my opinion. And I think the use of these apps and these wearables and the phones, I mentioned we keep our phone, I think if everyone looks at their phone right now, it's probably within arm's reach of it, right? So having a way to effectively use the phones through any sort of intervention that you're going to do is going to be key.
Excellent. So I think we have a little bit shy of a crowd, but if you have questions, don't be afraid to type them out. You can ask specifically questions to a specific individual. I do see we do have a question that just came in. So it's basically, how would you convince non-tech savvy people to use digital solutions? So basically, if you're trying to drive everyone to this mobile solution, and this is an open-ended question for everyone, how do you basically convince those who maybe are reluctant or not necessarily early adapters of new things?
Yeah, I'd like to say something on that as an app developer. I think nowadays mobile apps should be so intuitive that non-tech savvy people use them. I think if you look today, I think the fastest growing group user group on Facebook are elderly people. So I think non-tech savvy people not being able to handle digital, I think is outdated. Technology has adapted in a way that that basically allows anybody to interact with it, and the mobile phone has become just as the smartphone, just as a easy tool as people using cutlery, I think, by now. So yeah, I see that less as a thing. Maybe when you start connecting it with wearables, etc., then you get a threshold. So then it's, I think, all about activation, communication, informing that you have to do around it. But primary application use nowadays is pretty much yeah, done by everybody.
Can I just give a real simple solution to that as well, just to back up what Hugo was saying? One thing we do with a lot of our clients that go on the Virtuagym platform is we actually hold sessions within the organization on how to download it, how to set it up, you know, how to input your data, what features to use, etc. And obviously now that we're working, you know, virtually, I'm sure that can be easily developed as a video for individuals when they do receive maybe an email that they're now on the Virtuagym platform. So even just some simple solutions like that have really helped us.
And it's an issue of self-efficacy for a lot of people. They don't think they can get there. So if you can introduce it in a way that's digestible, just invite them to be themselves only through a TV screen. It doesn't have to be so complicated where they're getting into the intricacies of the development of the mobile app or writing code, or it doesn't have to be that way. We just opened up Zoom and said, be yourself with your clients, and you can do the exact same thing you could do in person. And just the downloading of Zoom or some other live streaming app is pretty straightforward. And then they can just do what they do best, which is help people with their health and wellness. And if you introduce it like that, and then step up to, you know, the use of Virtuagym or the use of another technology, I feel like that's the easiest way to get it introduced.
Yeah, so I totally agree, but I think that's primarily a matter of activation then, right? So I think typically it's not so much the technology anymore, as well as getting people to take the time to make those steps and form strategies around to activate people in the program. And
a huge part of it is just keeping it simple. Like regardless of who you're speaking to, like you need to work with them at their pace effectively. Like if it's, well, you can't rush into anything to do with technology, just to be aware and to be cognizant of the fact that some people aren't straight up digital natives or ready to jump on straight away or whatever it is, but allowing for that time and planning for that time for there to be hiccups, to be that, but not to allow it to actually kind of bring the people using the technology down, allowing them to get that. They're like, you could be the best teacher in the world, you have all the knowledge, but the inability to then portray that to someone else can have a huge effect. So I think it is a huge part of it is planning how you're going to activate the use of this technology or any technology when it comes to wellness.
Excellent, guys. I do apologize. I know some panelists have already told me ahead of time that they basically had to run to other important meetings as well. So I want to be conscientious of time. I just would like to one last time thank the expert panelists for joining. Obviously, you're the ones giving the expert opinions. Not only do the attendees learn a lot, but I also benefited from the one-on-one conversations I had for you guys. So I appreciate your time. I would also say to the attendees from my discussions with these gentlemen as well, They're all on LinkedIn. They're super happy to become connections, give advice, etc. So I would definitely share this philosophy that we should be interacting with each other. So this presentation and a video recording will be sent to you guys tomorrow. I'll keep the screen open just for a little bit in case there's any final clerical questions, but at this time we'll be closing off the webinar in just a few minutes. So thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks
Thanks
so much,
very much.
Derek. Thanks, everybody.
All right, thanks again, panelists. I appreciate you guys joining. It was a pleasure, really. And let's definitely keep in touch. And yeah, as you guys, I see you guys are also doing some really cool webinars as well. So we'll definitely be able to share those with you as well, help you guys with them. Seems like you guys, FitVision in Ireland, you're doing several webinars a day.
Lovely to meet you all, guys, as well.
You too. I just put my LinkedIn if you all want to connect in the chat box.
Absolutely,
Oh,
Matt.
brilliant.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks,
All right.
guys.
Thanks,
See ya.
guys. See
Talk to you all
next
soon.
Thanks.
Bye bye.
See ya.
Take care, guys. Bye, everyone.